Hello and welcome to the Central Television. I am Likon Obanjo. Here are the stories making headlines beyond the continent. We begin in the U.S., where U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has urged the international community to fight together against synthetic drugs, including the powerful opioid fentanyl, which has killed tens of thousands of Americans. The synthetic opioid is 50 times more powerful than heroin and much easier and cheaper to produce. Blinken told delegates at a conference of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime that the U.S. is looking to earmark $175 million for the next fiscal year for a global fight against synthetic drugs. The UN agency's executive director, Gad Awali, told the gathering that synthetic drugs were compounding the threat of traditional plant-based illicit drugs.
American people know someone who has died from an opioid overdose. Synthetic drugs are now the #1 killer of Americans aged 18 to 45. My message to this gathering is urgent. If we want to change the trajectory of this crisis, there is only one way to succeed, and that's together. Finally, join the now 151 countries and 14 international organizations in the global coalition to address synthetic drug threats. Just since last July, when this coalition came together, we've been working to identify ways that we can cooperate to prevent the manufacture and trafficking of synthetic drugs, to detect emerging threats, to strengthen public health interventions. Together, the coalition's developed specific recommendations for actions that countries can take, as well as identified more than 120 initiatives to support these efforts.
Judge Scott McAfee has ruled in Georgia that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis and her office can continue prosecuting Donald Trump and his co-defendants, but only if Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade steps down. In his Friday ruling, McAfee said the defense failed to meet its burden, proving that Willis acquired an actual conflict of interest in this case through her personal relationship and recurring travels with her lead prosecutor. However, the judge said the record in the case highlighted a significant appearance of impropriety that infects the current structure of the prosecution team, and appearance that must be removed through the state's selection of one or two options. Joining us on the news to discuss this is Bulu Michael B., a global affairs analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on the news. So tell us, what's your reaction to Judge McAfee's ruling allowing the office to continue prosecuting Donald Trump and his co-defendants with the condition that Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade must step down?
Well, I think the outcome is kind of expected, in the sense that, there has to be a link between Donald Trump or the district attorney or the special prosecution before we can say that there's a conflict of interest. So it's not really a surprise to me about the outcome, because it's been a long case, and when the district attorney took office, she met about 16,000 cases due to the COVID pandemic, and she kind of prioritized the Donald Trump case so that to be able to meet everything be sorted before the elections that's coming up later in the year. So it's just a case of removing the bad apple. The solution for a headache is not to cut off the head. So if you have five apples, and one of them is bad, you just throw away the one that is bad, so it won't contaminate the remaining four, instead of throwing all the apples away. And I think that's what Judge McAfee did, which is expected and pretty fair in my opinion.
Okay, I will still need you to help us understand this better. Now, Willis had a romantic relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade, who she hired to supervise the case against Trump and 14 others for allegedly trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election in the state. So the judge said the romantic affair had created a significant appearance of impropriety. But then how does that amount to a conflict of interest?
Not amount to conflict of interest per se, because the court does not like to delve much into the personal lives of individuals. It's not a matrimonial cause. It's strictly a case between the district attorney and the special prosecution. And let's not forget as well that these individuals, they have a fundamental human right to family and private life. So what they are trying to establish in the case is if there's a link, the nexus, even if no matter how tenuous, that is slight, as the court will say, if there's a link between Donald Trump and the district attorney, as well as or Donald Trump and the special prosecution. That way, we know that it can vitiate the outcome of the result or the outcome of the judgment that may come on Donald Trump, because we can say that either of them may receive some form of remuneration or benefit from Donald Trump, but there's no link. So the outcome of the result of the judgment is not really surprising. There's no link between them and Donald Trump.
All right, so if Willis refuses to remove Wade, McAfee said it will refer the case to the prosecuting attorney's council of Georgia for reassignment. And that's an option that would almost certainly delay the trial well past the November 5 presidential election. So is that going to be a major setback for Donald Trump's presidential bid?
I don't think so, because Donald Trump has gone too far right now not to get the ticket. So whatever the outcome may be, whether it's referred or maybe till later, Georgia is too small in terms of electoral votes, or even if they're not, elections are going to take place in Georgia, it's not enough to vitiate the entire election or the U.S. election. So if the election doesn't take place in Georgia, it doesn't mean Donald Trump cannot still be president. If there's no primary in Georgia, Donald Trump has gone too far for him not to clinch it. If I think he's still going to get the points, he's still going to get what is required, the cutoff for him to be to be able to get the ticket or even the presidency as a whole in the general election. So I don't think it affects significantly Donald Trump presidential bid in any way. I think he'll just stay in the corner and actually be laughing at them. Okay, so they've been trying to prosecute if they don't have their house together.
Okay, so then how do you see this ruling shaping the future of the case and its implications for similar high-profile prosecutions in the future?
I also don't think that it will affect the future of other high-profile cases, because each case is different. Each case is unique. Before this case, there's been several other cases, and there's not been instances like this. We can as well say that what happened, that why is it not shaping the future, which is the current. So there's no assurance that this current case would affect other high-profile cases, because each case is unique, each case is different. I think where it affects Georgia most is their reputation. I've lived in Georgia for a bit, and they seem to kind of tolerate a lot of sexual and romantic aberrations. And if this is happening at the court level, who are meant to be the custodians of individual and corporate morality, and this is happening, I think it casts a dark cloud or aspersion on the reputation of Georgia. Otherwise, I don't think it affects any future high-profile cases.
Okay, Bulu, Michael, Biggie, thank you so much for talking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Let's now tell you that the father of a Michigan school gunman who killed 4 students has been convicted of manslaughter. The trial heard that James Crumbley had ignored his 15-year-old son's mental health needs, buying him a handgun he used in the November 2021 attack. His wife, Jennifer Crumbley, will be sentenced next month after being convicted on the same charges. Their son, Ethan, killed 4 fellow 4 students while 7 people were injured in the shooting. He is serving a sentence of life in prison without parole. In South America, Argentina's Senate has rejected a massive deregulation package submitted by the government of President Javier Milei. This is the second legislative blow to his plans for drastic economic reform. Senators voted 42 to 25 against the president's deregulation mega decree, but it still has a chance of being approved in the lower house or chamber of deputies. For it to be rejected, both houses must agree. Meanwhile, filmmakers, actors, students, and other workers in the film industry clashed with police during a protest against the budget cuts to the sector announced by President Javier Milei.
Hay un montón de producciones paradas desde hace ya, desde que empezó este gobierno, y va a seguir por un tiempo más. Y ahora lo que está diciendo es que se quiere vender el cine Gaumont. quieren recortar todo lo que es festivales, que no son más festivales. El Festival de Cine de Mar del Plata lo quieren recortar, histórico, Ventana Sur y todos los festivales que financia el Inca lo quieren bajar.
Es considerada una de las mejores escuelas de cine de Latinoamérica y ahora está en jaque con todo esto del corte de presupuesto. Estoy en mi tercer año, estoy haciendo mi tesis, significa que ya estaba a punto de recibirme. 3 años estuve intentando entrar a esta institución porque tanto significa para mí y ahora de repente puede ser que todo desaparezca.
We now take you to North America, where Haiti's resigning government has extended a nighttime curfew in the capital, Port-au-Prince. This comes after shots were heard on Thursday in Port-au-Prince after 3 days of relative calm, at a time when negotiations on the creation of transitional authorities continue to try to get the Caribbean country out of its deep political crisis and make it safe. According to Sipampoa Police Union, the outgoing government extended the nighttime curfew until Sunday in the West Department, which includes the capital. The residence of the General Director of Police was looted and then set on fire by bandits. Meanwhile, on Monday evening, Prime Minister Ariel Henry, whose mandate was marked by a rise in gang power, announced that he was resigning.
Si le mauvais monde, par exemple, si on signe un problème, dans le moment ça, pas même à l'hôpital, on a un petit monde qui est malade. Comment on fait dans le moment qu'il y a un problème pour me sortir avec la nuit? Est-ce que je peux sortir? En plus, on est dans la prison, il n'y a pas la rue. Décision, libre, même moi, on prend trop de temps pour on pouvait faire un mois dans un pays comme ça. Moi, elle va juste.
You're watching Beyond the Continent on News Central Television. We'll go on a short break to be back with more stories in a bit. Many thanks for staying with us. The High-Level Commission of Inquiry on the Rights Situation in Ukraine since the full-scale invasion says it has found fresh evidence that strengthens the Commission's previous findings that torture used by Russian authorities in Ukraine and in the Russian Federation has been widespread and systematic. The Commission's chief, Eric Moss, also voiced concern about the continued use of explosive weapons in civilian areas, confirming a pattern of disregard by Russian armed forces for possible harm to civilians.
The Commission's previous findings that torture used by Russian authorities in Ukraine and in the Russian Federation has been widespread and systematic. The latest investigation focused on cases of torture of Ukrainian prisoners of war. Victims' accounts disclosed relentless, brutal treatment, inflicting severe pain and suffering during prolonged detention, with blatant disregard for human dignity. During this period, the Commission traveled to Ukraine 16 times and visited 34 settlements in 9 provinces. We have relied on interviews with 816 persons. The current report focuses on 3 aspects: the systematic and widespread use of torture against Ukrainian prisoners of war, the severe impact on civilians on the fighting and the siege of Mariupol city, and attacks affecting cultural objects and historical sites, as well as seizure of cultural objects.
In the meantime, Russia began voting on Friday in an election set to prolong President Vladimir Putin's rule by 6 more years. Meanwhile, Ukraine branded the votes a farce and launched a barrage of deadly attacks on border regions. Officials in Moscow warned against any protest during the March 15 to 17 presidential votes after calls from the opposition for anti-Putin demonstrations on Sunday. The Kremlin says the votes will show that the country is fully behind its assault on Ukraine and polling stations have been set up in Russian-held territories. Ahead of the election, Kyiv ramped up its aerial bombardment of Russian regions just across their shared border. And also, President Vladimir Putin on Friday says his military would respond to a string of Ukrainian attacks on Russia that he described as an attempt by Kiev to derail presidential elections. Russian border regions this week have been targeted by fatal Ukrainian bombardments and faced repeated incursions by pro-Kiev militias comprised of anti-Kremlin Russians. Putin, in a televised comment at a meeting with a Security Council, said these strikes by the enemy do not and will not go unpunished. The vow comes on the first day of voting in Russia's presidential election, with shelling hitting the city of Belgorod, where authorities reported one death.
Этих бессмысленных с военной и преступной с гуманитарной точки зрения акций является, как уже было сказано, попытка помешать выборам президента России. Уверен, наши люди, народ России ответят на это еще большей сплоченностью. Кого они решили запугать? Русский народ? Многонациональный народ России? Такого не было и, уверен, никогда не будет.
We also tell you that a Russian missile attack has hit civilian infrastructure in Ukraine's Black Sea port city of Odessa on Friday, killing at least 14 people and wounding 46 in Moscow's deadliest attack in weeks. Russia has stepped up its strikes on the southern city in recent weeks, launching drones or missiles almost every day. Officials say first responders who arrived at the scene of a Russian missile attack on homes in the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa on Friday were themselves struck by a second missile. A paramedic and an emergency service worker were among the 14 people said to have been killed. Away from that, the Netherlands announced on Friday that it has chosen France's Naval group for a multi-billion euro contract to build 4 attack submarines for its navy. State Secretary for Defense Christophe van der Vaart said after Naval Group was chosen over Germany's ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems and Sweden's Saab AB that a choice of Naval Group, 2 naval yards, didn't win and understands that the disappointment is large.
Moment. Ik ben trots en als ik heel eerlijk ben, ook een beetje opgelucht dat ik vandaag bekend kan maken wie onze nieuwe onderzeeboten gaat bouwen. Er is lang op dit moment gewacht, dus ik kom meteen ter zake. De werf die onze 4 nieuwe onderzeeboten gaat bouwen is Naval Groep.
We go on another short break. We'll be back with the rest of the stories. Thousands of Houthi supporters took part in a demonstration in Sana'a in solidarity with Gaza as the war between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas rages. As Muslim worshippers marked the first Friday of the fasting month of Ramadan, Palestinians from the occupied West Bank queued to pass through Israeli checkpoints to reach the revered Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in annexed East Jerusalem.
نعرف ماذا علينا وما تبعات هذه الحرب لا تؤثر علينا إنما تؤثر على العدو الأمريكي الإسرائيلي اليوم كما هم يطبقون الحصار عن غزة نحن نطبق الحصار على إسرائيل.
الهجمات في البحر الأحمر وفي البحر العربي تزيدنا شرفا وتزيدنا قربا من الله وتزيدنا ارتفاعا في مقدار الإيمان عندنا وهذا شرف كبير لليمنيين حتى لو خسرنا أنفسنا خسرنا.
Finally, in Asia, China has responded to comments by the U.S. ambassador to China that Beijing's position on a potential TikTok ban in the United States was supremely ironic, given the ruling Communist Party's censorship of online platforms within its borders. Wang Weibing, a spokesman for the Foreign Ministry, stated that a nation that values free speech and considered itself to have a free market economy is prepared to utilize the state's authority to impose restrictions on particular businesses. This comes after the U.S. House of Representatives overwhelmingly approved a bill on Wednesday that would force the widely popular short video app to break with its Chinese parent company or face a nationwide ban.
自由市场经济的国家，却不惜动用国家力量打压特定企业，这才是真正的具有讽刺意味。中国对待境外社交媒体的政策，同美方对待 TikTok 的态度完全不具有可比性。只要遵守中国法律法规的要求，我们一向欢迎各类平台产品服务进入中国市场。这一规定对所有的外国企业一视同仁。
And that's all at this hour. Don't forget to send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number and email on your screen. And while you do that, follow us on our social media platforms at News Central TV. And you can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekon Onabanjo.